Hello everyone, Ashley here from the Woodland Wisp, and today I'm going to show you guys how to make one of these little secret mushroom jars. These were made from this little jar and they were a little bit tricky to make because of this flexible silicone cap, but I did find a process that works and I'm pretty happy with the way that these turned out. I've got two red ones here, and I've also got two different shades of blue that I tried, and I am going to be making this darker blue one today. So I have my jar here, and for clays I am using a white polymer for the jar and stem, and I will be using a small piece of air dry clay for the cap and lid. And for tools, I've got a daughter that I will also be using as a roller, a razor knife or some type of cutting tool, and my straight pen. And you will also need some kind of guide to make a straight line. I'm just using a piece of paper. Now, to ensure that these jars look nice and clean on the inside, we are going to start by making the bottom first and then building the walls around it. So I am just gonna stamp this jar on here and then cut out that circle with my razor knife. And then I'm just going to press that circle into the bottom of the jar, and you want to get as much surface contact as you can. And you can turn this over and look at it from the inside to make sure that you don't have any air bubbles in there. And then I'm just going to begin dragging that edging downwards into the jar so it's nice and rounded and smooth. Here it is, and for the walls of this, you will want a strip of that white clay that's wide enough to cover the side of the jar and long enough to wrap all the way around it. And I am going to start by making a nice straight line down one side using my piece of paper as a guide. And now I'm going to put the lid back on the jar, and I am going to wrap this strip around, fitting that straight edge right up against that silicone cap. So I do want a nice straight line on the side, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this, making sure there's enough there on the bottom to wrap over. And then I'm just going to finish wrapping this around the jar, and when you make it to the other side, you will want to smooth that straight edge into the glass just like we did on the bottom. And now I'm going to cut the other end here with my razor knife and smooth that right into the other side. And now I'm just smoothing that lower edge around the bottom. And if you have more excess here than me, you can just trim that away with your razor knife. And once the jar is covered, I'm going to go ahead and remove this cap, and I am just going to begin pinching that top edge against the glass as well to adhere it good and make room for the main. And I also want to add some surface texture to this before we put the main on. So I have my dotting tool here, and I am just dragging some nice shallow lines down the side of this stem all the way around. This is what that base texture looks like, and for the main I have rolled out a nice thin strip of clay, and I am going to cut this right down the center. So you want strips that are skinny and kind of wavy. You don't want super straight lines here. And now I'm going to take my razor knife and begin cutting some small lines in the edge of that strip, and they don't have to be evenly spaced. Just pay attention to make sure that they're not too wide or too skinny. Wide ones won't look natural, and if they're too skinny, then they could be delicate and break off. Here's a closer look at those cut lines, and now I'm just going to begin wrapping this around the top of the jar, being careful to ensure that you're only adhering that strip above those cut lines. And now I am just trimming away that excess, and I am going to take my razor knife and very gently pull all of those strips away from that stem, just like this. And then I'm going to pinch that clay around the top rim one more time. And now I'm adding some of that same base texture on the main, starting above those cut lines and working upward towards the cap. This is what that mane looks like, and I want to do a little bit more surface texture on this stem before moving on to the cap. So I am using that same dotting tool to add some shallow dot work all the way around this lower edge. And then I'm going to add some deeper divots. So if you lay that dotting tool on its side and kind of push the clay upwards, you can make some deeper little divots here, and you don't want a lot of these. You're just going to kind of place them randomly all the way around that stem. This is what it looks like, and I'm not sure how well you guys can see this because the clay is white. But they will be much more prominent when it's painted. So I am going to grab my straight pin here, and as a final step, I am just adding some really light dot work with my straight pin all the way around that lower edge and around that top rim as well, above those cut lines on that mane. This is what that stem looks like, and we are going to go ahead and replace that cap. And I am just going to press this on here good so that I can get that nice straight cap line again. And then I'm going to peel the lid off very gently, and using my razor knife, I am just going to cut around that line. Here it is, and I did not remove that excess on top of that cut line. I'm going to go ahead and bake this at 275 for about an hour. And once your piece is baked and cooled, you should be able to get your razor knife under some of that excess there, and it should just peel right off. So now we have a nice clean line there, and the cap fits right up against that stem. And I will be using some air dry clay for the cap and lid. This is some Sculpey air dry, and I am just using a small ball of it. Now, the reason I chose to use air dry clay instead of polymer was because I could not for the life of me get this little silicone cap to stay put in the oven. So this was my first attempt, and I don't like the cap on this at all. I wasn't happy with the big white dots, and I felt like with the wider stem, the cap needed to be larger and a bit more round. Now this piece I cut nice and flat around the top of that cap, and the clay molded to the lid just fine. I didn't have any trouble making it, but as soon as it got hot in the oven, that cap would just pop out of the center. And it didn't matter if I placed it face up or face down or tried to leave it on the jar, it just wouldn't stay put. And with this particular cap, I just glued it back in when I was done. This is the second one, and it is much more round, but because I drug that clay down and rounded it on the edge, when the cap popped off, it caused all these little cracks to form. And at that point, I was frustrated and ready to give up. So I decided to try one with air dry clay. That was this little blue one. That's why it's a lighter blue, because I was trying to match the same color. And the cap turned out really, really great on this one. So I originally did the stem in air dry clay too, and I decided that the mane here was just a little bit too delicate to do in air dry clay. So I went with polymer for the stem and air dry clay for the cap, and they turned out great. So I am going to start by just smoothing out this ball. I'm going to clean up all of these little wrinkles and divots and make it nice and smooth and round. Now, in order for the lid to fit right when it's done, you will want to put the lid on the jar while you're molding your cap. Air dry clay is very solid when it's cured, and this lid is very flexible. Now, in order for you guys to better see what I'm doing, I do have an extra jar here, so you're not trying to look around that mane. And I am going to start by getting the lid nice and wet so that that air dry clay will stick to it. And I am just going to place that ball on the top, and again, we want to keep this nice and round. So you're going to apply very gentle pressure on the top and then begin slowly working that edge down around the sides of that lid, keeping everything centered and trying to keep it as even as you can around the edges there. And I am just pressing this into the cup of my hand to keep it nice and round on the top. And once you've got down pretty close to that edge of that lid, you can begin rounding that off. So you're just going to round it right inside there to the glass. And don't worry if it's a little bit rough, we are going to take the cap off and smooth it up on the bottom. And once you've got that edge nice and round, you can go ahead and gently remove the cap again, and we are just gonna clean it up around the edge here. And because air dry clay is so soft and blendy, you can easily add additional pieces to fill in any gaps or dents. And once you've got that cap nice and round and smooth and you're happy with it, you can go ahead and put it back on the jar. And the only thing that sucks about this is that air dry clay takes forever to dry. I left this piece to cure for about a day and a half, and the only thing left to do now is paint and seal it. Now for the stem itself, I am just doing a dark wash to bring some of those textures to the surface. So this color is burnt umber, and I am just going to paint the whole thing and then wipe it away with a damp cloth. Here it is, and you just want that darker color to settle into all of those little cracks and holes that we made. And then I'm going to take a little bit more of that burnt umber and just make the very top edge here a little bit darker. That is it for the stem. I'm going to go ahead and let that dry. And for the cap, again, I am doing this darker blue one today, and the dark blue and red ones here were both painted with these folk art enamels. So aqua is the color I'm using today, and the others were painted with lipstick red. And I am just going to paint the whole cap and let it dry, and then add a second coat before adding our dots. And once that cap is dry, I am using that same dotting tool to add my white dots to the top, starting with some larger individual dots, and then dipping my tool less frequently to create some smaller dots in between them and around that lower edge. And then I'm going to seal the cap and stem with 2 coats of satin varnish. Here is the finished piece, and these make really great decorative items, but you could put an ice screw here in the top, and they would also make great keychains or purse charms. And now that I have a basic process for these, I am really excited to experiment with some different colors and designs. Now, I would also like to note that all of the jars I used here were recycled. I removed the labels and cleaned them really well with alcohol, but you would be amazed at the number of people who just throw them in the trash. So if you're wondering what to use these for, they are really great for collecting dried flower seeds in the summer and fall, storing homemade beauty products such as eyeshadows, lip balms, or cream perfumes, or you can color code the caps and use them to store smaller craft supplies such as glitter and rhinestones or gemstones. And these little mushroom ones would make really cute fairy themed gifts or party favors with some mints or small candies. If you guys enjoyed this video or you're looking for more mushroom designs, please visit my channel and check out my enchanted mushroom earrings or explore some of my other polymer clay tutorials. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. That is it for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching.